um, Deepa and my friend Benedict, distinguished colleagues, friends. It's a great honor and a great privilege to be invited to help launch this book and to share a few thoughts on the life and work of one of the most extraordinary teachers and business thinkers India has produced. Benedict begins his book with the old story of the blind man and the elephant. I think most of us know it, but different people feel the trunk, the tail, the legs, and the torso. They're all trying to figure out what this is all about. And so it is with this extraordinary, multifaceted man. Was he simply a highly original business thinker, or was he teacher extraordinaire? Right? Was he just a super successful management consultant, or a mentor and coach to business leaders around the world? Was he a nationalist and a patriot, or was he this amazing family man, a great father and a great husband? Of course, he was all of these, but it's difficult to sort of put all the pieces together, which you've done in an extraordinarily interesting way. See, sometimes a person gets so famous that, and so much is already written about them, but to say anything new or original becomes challenging. Okay, it becomes tiresome and repetitive. And I thought you've done a really nice job of positioning this well. I hope you read this book because it's extraordinarily interesting. Usually biographies are dull affairs, sequential thing. The person was born here, they went to that school, this is what happened next. Here he tells C.K.'s life in terms of the impact he's had on multiple dimensions. Okay, and I thought that's a very nice way of telling the story. So there are at least three ways in which C.K. changed the world. Probably many more, but three that are worth talking about. The first way in which he changed the world was through the power of his ideas. I think you all know Chairman Mao's famous statement. It says that the pen is mightier than the sword. In other words, ideas are more powerful eventually than any army. And C.K. turns out to have been a really disruptive thinker and a real revolutionary in terms of his ideas. And in the early part of his career, I think he seems to have been deeply interested by the question, what makes companies tick? More importantly, why are certain small minnows or Davids able to dethrone Goliaths with vastly greater resources and capabilities? And the way he developed this, his theory, was through a series of powerful articles, which eventually came together in a book, I think, called The Future of Competition, if I'm not mistaken. But there were seminal ideas which really reshaped how we think about business strategy. And the ideas were around dominant logic, which we today call business model, the idea of strategic intent, the idea of core competence of the corporation, and if that strategy is not about resources and constraints, but rather about stretch and leverage. So this was a very rich body of work developed, I think, over a couple of decades. And then, of course, he went on to, pioneer a whole new area, which is the field of poverty and the poor. And that's, of course, made famous through his book, Fortune at the Bottom of the Pyramid, in which he lent dignity to the poor, their dreams, their lives, their aspirations, and told businesses not only is there money to be made by serving them, but more importantly, the poor are a source of innovation. And of course, today, married with sustainability, these ideas are now seen as fairly mainstream. So, quite remarkable. Most management thinkers are lucky if they can make a dent once. To do it once, twice, three times in different fields is quite exceptional. The second area where Professor Prahalad made his dent was India itself. All of us are beneficiaries of liberalization. And Benedict points out right in his introduction, we tend to give the credit entirely to the politicians of 1991, particularly Prime Minister Narasimha Rao, and to a lesser extent, former Prime Minister Manmohan Singh. But just because the economy opened didn't automatically mean that Indian businesses would thrive. In fact, the biggest risk for a decade after India opened up was that our domestic companies would get swamped and overrun by global competition. So he brings out very nicely in this book how Professor C.K., from 94 till the time he passed away, dedicated himself to creating globally competitive enterprises out of India. And he did that starting, I think, in 94 by challenging, provoking, kicking CEOs into a state of wakefulness and then mentoring, coaching, supporting, working with them to create these globally successful enterprises, which we today almost take for granted. Companies like ICICI, many of the Tata Group companies, Wipro, Infosys, etc. This is not a story that is well known and well understood. And I think that may be the single most important and significant chapter in this book and worth reading. I learned a lot. And the final way in which I think C.K. made an extraordinary difference to the world was by being this teacher. And for him, it wasn't just the students in the classroom. Every interaction with every person was a teaching moment. The whole world was his classroom. Okay, and I think there are nice stories here how the cab driver gets a lesson. The person, the videographer, the people putting up the AV equipment are all his students, not just the big CEOs, business leaders, and those who come to the classroom. And through this, he really did change the world. I thought I'll conclude by talking about my own sort of minor experience of being mentored by C.K. I was very young in 1988 when I first read his article on strategic intent. And it was like, wow, this is really interesting. I must go to business school. Frankly, that was the single biggest reason which made me move from engineering into business. And it also inspired me to start writing. What Preeti, you didn't say is, I think of myself first and foremost today as an author, not as all those other things. But in 1990, I wrote my first article in the HBR, Harvard Business Review. And through a funny coincidence, it was the March-April issue of 1990, which was the same issue in which C.K.'s article, The Core Competence of the Corporation, was published. Just a coincidence. But after that, for the next 15 years, I used to eagerly look forward to the next article from C.K., much like we used to look forward to the next product announcement from Apple under Steve Jobs, right? Highly original, very innovative, deeply disruptive. But I never met the man. This is like Ekalavya, worshipping some teacher from afar. You never even know who he is. This was before YouTube, so I didn't even know what he looked like. I just said, this man is great. Finally, in 2002, I had the opportunity to attend the CEO Forum in Mumbai. And that's when I got to meet him. Probably because he didn't see any potential in me, probably because I was too sort of disruptive, even by his standards. I was never invited back. But in 2006, we started our real active collaboration. I was then at Microsoft, and the company needed to change in very deep and fundamental ways to succeed in emerging markets like India. And so I put together an advisory board, and CK was kind enough to join it. And I thought, yeah, he's saying yes, but he's never going to attend these meetings. He's far away in California and Michigan and buzzing around the world. He didn't miss a single meeting, and he was extraordinarily generous with his time between meetings. And we addressed some really difficult issues, okay? Back then, piracy of software was Microsoft's #1 issue. It wasn't Google and Apple. This is pre-Google and Apple days. And so, the company had this view that the government of India must enforce intellectual property rights, do more for copyright protection and things like that. CK was very loud and dissonant. He said, listen, these things are all fine, but if Microsoft wants to deal with piracy, you have to change your business model. And this was not what we wanted to hear, but we started working together and we've introduced something called differential pricing. And so, for instance, today, if you take a product like Microsoft Office, which many of you use, depending on which version and who you are, the price ranges from $0 to $400, okay? And the piracy rate really, really did come down. Then after that, he became consumed with the idea of the bottom of the pyramid. And so the challenge was, how do you make a PC relevant to the bottom of the pyramid when they have such basic existential issues? And that's when we had started a digital literacy or computer literacy program. But he said, listen, what you're doing is going to make no difference. You need to have scale. And he helped us build this program today. It has touched 40 million children across the country. And then finally he said, listen, if you want to succeed, the mobile phone is the future, not the PC. And for Microsoft as the PC company, this was a very difficult message. He said we're moving from a computing-oriented paradigm to a communications-oriented paradigm, and the future is the mobile phone. We didn't take him seriously, and of course the leadership passed to different companies as a result. And then finally in 2009, he said, Ravi, your time here is over. You need to get out of your comfort zone. You need to leave the Microsoft and all that and really see if you can make a difference. And after 18 months, I had the courage to do that. It was ironic. The last time I heard from C.K. was 5 days before he passed away. I'd asked him for a letter of recommendation for something I was applying to. And uncharacteristically, he never replied. So I was bothered by that, and because the deadline was approaching, and I wrote to him and I said, listen, CK, I really need this, and could you do it? The phone rang, and he said, listen, I'm not very well. In fact, I'm calling you from ICU, but don't worry, Deepa, I'll get it to you. And she did, and much to my chagrin, 4 days later, he was no more. But I cannot imagine another person who from the ICU dictates a letter of reference to some bloke far away. So I used to think I was special in his heart until I realized everybody was special in his heart. Okay, that he had this kind of a special relationship with many people. There was nothing all that unusual about it. And so it taught me, if you want to amplify your impact, just tiny amounts of time spent judiciously, you can really help a lot of people grow and flourish and have more impact. So what is the key message that I take away from his life? It is a highly empowering one. It says whether you're an individual, whether you're a company, or even a country like India, you don't have to accept the conditions into which you were born, okay? You can shape your own destiny to a far greater extent than you realize or imagine. The key is what? You need to be able to dream big dreams. And the more outrageous your dream, the better. Okay? You need to be able to rewrite and rethink the rules of the game. You need to not think about resources so much as resourcefulness. And you need to be willing to work really hard and have incredible tenacity. And if you do these things, the chances are you're going to have a bigger impact than you ever imagined. And I thought that's like they say about Gandhi, his life is his message. That's how I think about CK. And I'm reminded also of a quote by Margaret Mead, the famous one that says, never doubt the ability of a single person or a small group of committed people to change the world. Indeed, it's the only thing that ever has. And I think CK's life is living proof of this. I'll just conclude by saying one thing. In India, we venerate great leaders and so forth. So we venerate Gandhiji, we venerate Pandit Nehru, we venerate a man as accomplished as CK. And what do we do when we venerate people? We put up statues, we name roads and buildings after them, and so forth. I think that's all fine. But if we ever wanted to show respect and gratitude to CK, I think the most important thing is not endowing more chair professorships, so much as making a decision that as we leave this room, we're going to take some risks, we're going to live our life to our fullest potential. I believe nothing would make him happier than that. But again, congratulations, Benedict, on a really well-written book. I'm deeply skeptical about business books and things like that, but this time Truly, it was a pleasure to read, and thank you for making his life accessible.